Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you with us today. It's an overcast day in West Virginia, but it's a nice spring is here, and we're on our way running quickly towards summertime, and we're just happy to have you with us here. This is Quartet. We get together like this every 2 weeks to talk about some deep and kind of profound and important, fascinating, hopefully, aspect of the big giant change that we're all experiencing today. And I'm joined, as I always am, by my friends, Penny Kelly. Hello, Penny.
Hi there, John. Hi, Kingsley. Hi, Greg. Greg.
Oh, that
and hi to everybody else
that
out
guy,
there.
Greg Braden. How are you, Greg?
I am here. I'm Greg with 2 G's, Penny, and I'm doing well. Hello, everyone. Kingsley, it's good to see you as well.
And Kingsley Dennis coming to us from the kind of weather that we are having today, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Hi, John, Benny, and Greg. Yeah, we're having the same weather, but luckily I have the Matisse dancers still dancing behind me, so that's good.
Well, it's nice to be here today. This is going to be a very interesting conversation because we're going to talk about how in the world do you get to a world where you don't need any money. It's a deeper, more important idea than perhaps you initially think. So stay with us here. So let's go around the table as we usually do and start with you, Kingsley. What's been on your mind? What have you been thinking about?
Well, I mean, just before we came on air a couple of hours ago, the news came up that there's been an assassination attempt on the Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico, and he's in intensive care. And just as a reminder, he came into power just at the end of October last year, and he immediately came into power on his manifesto of being not sending any more support or money to Ukraine, and also being very vocal against the pandemic treaty, which is coming up end of this month. So it's a worrying factor that he's had an assassination attempt on him today. So that just cropped up. What I was going to say, of course, that we can't ignore the fact that over the last 5-6 days or so, we've had an amazing display of the solar flare impact across the world. And even here in my village, we had a whole sky in like lit up purple at midnight. So it's incredible to have these northern lights so far down the south. And many people were making comments that it's because of the solar flares, solar activity is so high. Not one person I spoke to locally made any mention of the fact that the main reason why we're receiving the flares is because the Earth's magnetic shielding is so low. When the solar wind blows, a major operation of soul making is put into effect. Again, it's come around in my head because, again, I see that there's timelines on the other side, the opposing forces, whatever happening, I get a sense that it's not to their timeline. And I feel that the more we're having these conversations, not only here, but everyone who's on the same page, the more we're talking about this and bringing it into the open and just participating in these themes, the more that we can derail the predictive planned timeline. So thank you for everyone engaging in these conversations.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you very much, Kingsley. Greg, what you been thinking about?
Wow, I've got Kingsley, thank you for everything you just shared. You and I are looking at a lot of the same things. I've got four items that were on my mind. The flares, the northern lights that came all the way down. You could see them in Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. What a lot of people don't know is we just experienced essentially a Carrington event class solar flare, C5. We dodged a bullet because it was directed into space rather than at Earth. Last time this happened was in the mid 1800s, and it fried every electrical power line. At that time, it was primarily telegraphs. And if it had been directed a different way, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So it tells us we are in solar flare season, and we dodged a bullet. Are there others out there? And there's a whole conversation around that. So I'm with you on that one, Kingsley. I have been watching very closely the geopolitical events in the Middle East and between America and Israel. We are now, and the atomic clock is, or the doomsday clock is the closest it's ever been to midnight, even closer than during the Cold War. So I've been watching that. When those things are happening, I'm always looking at what are we being distracted from? In the last two items, U.S. economy is in really, really bad shape. We're 123% debt to GDP. If that was you and me, John, we'd be filing Chapter 11 right now. We're broke. And the big one, you and I, John, have talked about this, that pandemic treaty that Kingsley just mentioned. The United States is participating in a way that surprised me, circumventing the intent of the ability for Congress to engage in something like this. So I'll stop there. That's what I've been looking at these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Penny?
Oh my. Well, I have to say that if we had a few less clouds, we might be able to see some of that solar activity or northern lights, but it has done nothing but rain here. So that has been on my mind to some extent, because what I see is a lot of fields are not planted yet, and it's mid-May. So that is very concerning. A second thing on my mind is the rising tension and the anger that I can feel in the population. And I'm not sure we're going to make it to November, to the election, without somebody blowing up or doing something. And that concerns me. The WHO treaty, that same treaty that Greg was just talking about, instead of making that a treaty, they made it an agreement. When you have a treaty, the whole Congress has to sign off. When you have an agreement, only the president has to sign off. And what I see coming is this whole chain reaction. People stop buying, the stores kind of dangle for a while, the banks go down, boom. We're in a big recession, not a little one, but a major recession. So that's what I've been watching.
Yeah, well, it's more than just a recession that's coming, because as Greg alluded to, and others, many others have talked about, particularly here at Transition Talks, is that the government is so much, has such a huge debt overhang that there's impossible that it's going to be able to pay all of this, and it's all going to come up to a head. So thank you all. Thank you very much. So it's time for questions, and we've got an amazing and a wonderful bunch of questions and comments primarily this time. And all of them are kind of focused on our last quartet, which and the topic is truth relative. And we generated, it was so much fun to read these responses from all these folks. It's very thoughtful and knowledgeable kind of reactions. And in general, the agreement is that truth is kind of relative, but in a sense, you can't operate if you don't believe something, and so there's some sense that there's kind of an operational kind of approach to all of this that kind of presumes some level of truth. But anyway, truth. Ruth Fisher, thank you very much, and Clint Norton, great comments, and Janine Richard or however, she had an interesting comment. She says the method and roles for which we are well documented and fairly easy to learn and implement if one commits oneself, and truths arrived at by critical thinking can ring true, which sounds subjective, to the seeker who uses rationality and empiricism to discern truth, just the same as truths arrived at through direct experience, like intuition. Typically, the subjective truths like I feel hungry or tired or happy and odd. And she says, well, what do you think? Does it make sense? So what do you think?
I'll say a couple of things. It is subjective. It's all subjective. I mean, you can't have a reality without subjectivity balancing the objectivity. We do have rules, and there is this wonderful thing called critical thinking, but that is something that I think needs to be used to, once you have the intuitive knowing, then you go and look and see, okay, does this make sense? Did I miss something? Is there something that I didn't see or didn't hear? Or then you chew on it a little bit, you think about it a little bit, and you let it rest inside of you, and up comes the bubble of your truth. And that's a process that hardly anybody engages in, but it's really important. So thank you, Janine.
Yes, thanks, Penny. I'd like to just to kind of say something similar, is that we need both. Critical thinking is very important, but it gets us through the process, gets us through this phenomenal world that we're dealing with. Because, you know, even the greatest sage or the wisdom teachers, they have a direct experience. It's very difficult to transmit a direct experience because it's almost impossible. So you have to, a person has to arrive there to their intuition through stages of critical thinking. And I think you need both until you can get to direct intuition and experience. Because we're in a physical world, we need to be active. And I think one of the problems today is that we have an increase in relativity, an increase in, let's say, the dissolution of truths and post-truth society. And because of our mainstream society and its modus operandi, we have a lack of people really exercising critical thinking and faculties. So put that together, you get a bit of a mess. So I think now critical thinking is very important to make discernment of relative truths.
Go ahead, Greg.
No, I'm going to ditto what both Penny and Kingsley said. And I think there has been one of the reasons we're having this conversation. There's been an intentional effort for at least two generations to move away from critical thinking. Our young people do not know, for the most part, how to participate in critical thinking, and they are relying on other people's information. But another piece of this we didn't talk about a lot is that we are all constrained by the language that we use to share whatever the objective or the subjective truth is. And although we have a commonality, places where we share an understanding, the reality is that we all interpret things, even in this group. We could use the same word and it means something a little different to each of us, and then it becomes very subjective for us. So I think in this reality, we're doing this dance and straddling the reality that's coming in where this all may change. And that's what I think is exciting. It's not to be so anchored into what is and is not, but rather to discern what is working for us right now that will serve us as we move into the new world and the new reality. And I think we'll probably find better language as well.
Well, I think I think you've put your finger on it, Greg. It seems to me like a big moving model that is throughout time, constantly gets updated, and it kind of generates internal consistency for a while, and everybody kind of believes that and uses that as the basis for making decisions and understanding reality, building paradigms. And then it shifts. You learn new things, science changes. We're in the middle of one of those giant changes now. And but it nevertheless is still a model. And unless you think that we've figured out everything, and I don't think we've figured out everything. You know, this is two different levels here. On one hand, they're trying to screw around with reality, the kind of the everyday kind of stuff, but it's also subjective at the lower level of kind of what basic truth is. And so let's talk about some more fundamentals now, because our topic today is about money. The world that we live in is a product of the basic ideas that animate our kind of activities in our reality as we understand it, and is the byproduct of those ideas. And so, to the extent that we can kind of identify major kind of problems with the present paradigm, it seems to me that you can distill those down to at least two specific kind of issues, and one is secrecy and one is money. They're linked together here. The problem with secrecy is that we're into a period of time of great change, fundamental structural change. And the only way that you can move as a large, complex social system, move from one state to another one in a time of great disruption, is with new ideas. That it is, in fact, the new reality is the product of an aggregation of new ideas. That's what makes it new. They're fundamental to the evolutionary push of the species from one level to the next level. And secrecy is antithetical to that whole push to a new level of evolution for the species. Secrecy essentially tamps down and contains these ideas, these new novel notions, that inventions and other kinds of things that are the fuel that allows for the evolutionary jump for the species. And the problem with it is that it is all built around keeping the secrets from the ones that keep the secrets are the powerful ones. They're not the common people. It's not the species at large or civilizations at large. It's small groups, whether they're corporations or governments, that spend a great deal of time and money trying to keep away from other people what they're what they're doing. So if you look at it one way, you can say that the way this works is that what is the secrecy for? Well, I would argue that a great deal, if not most of the secrecy, is all about money. Secrecy per se, the way the present system is structured, secrecy is going to be with us for a great deal of time, unless things change. And this emergent new human has the wisp, the patina of being something that will break apart secrecy, and it is telepathy. This ability to be able to instantaneously understand and what people are thinking and so on certainly throws a wrench in the middle of secrecy. So if you run down that track, you can say that into this future that's coming downstream, there's a distinct possibility. You can see how that the whole idea of secrecy could get turned around and not become as operational and significant as it is now. But what about the money? The money side, money is all about how do you transfer wealth or value in an environment where you don't have existing trust, because anybody can do bartering and everything with people that you know and that you trust, but it's when you want to buy a car and you got to deal with a car dealer, or particularly a used car dealer, if you want one, then you've got to have some basis in which there's equal understanding of wealth or value that it trades. Now, the problem with that is that our whole system is based upon money. By that, I mean, there are many other things that are of value. Some would argue even more value: integrity, love, a whole variety of things that we all value very deeply, and we, in our own way, we ascribe value to them. But there's only one way in which you kind of you monetize things, and that is with money. If you want to ask somebody, what are you worth? You're not asking them about, how do they feel in their education and other kinds of stuff. I mean, in just practical everyday terms, you're asking them about money. And you have this extraordinary infrastructure that's put in place to do nothing but count money. It's quantified, well, unlike anything else. And so the value of individuals, the value of families and companies and countries. I mean, we just talked about the problems that the United States government's got. We're talking about money. And so the whole issue is that the thing is the whole system is built around certainly in terms of commonly describing what the state of a certain organization or a group or an institution is. It's all about money. So if you look in downstream into this emergent new world, and you kind of wander around in the strange places that I do, you can easily run into people who talk about what aliens tell you is the way they live, and they live in a world that doesn't have any money. You can, maybe Penny can talk to us about. She can look downstream and look 50 years down the road, and you see a world, and it doesn't operate with money. And so you say to yourself, what is the equivalent, or what is the thing that might allow us, or combination of things, I don't know, that might allow us to live, to obviate, to depreciate the role of money in the way that we all live? And so I think it's an interesting question. And Greg, maybe we can start with you. What do you think?
Well, John, I've got a little bit different perspective. This is something I don't talk about this publicly a lot. I've had to understand this for myself. I was in a think tank during the Cold War years, and we were asking ourselves this very question when the battle between communism and capitalism was happening. So I'm going to make a statement, and then I'm going to unpack it a little bit here. I don't think that money is the problem. I think it's the currency that is the problem. And what we're actually talking about is, I think, is a deeply spiritual conversation. And I'm going to say that from this perspective. We are spiritual beings, and when we expend our life energy, we typically use that energy to produce one of three things. We use our life energy to produce goods that other people need. So, this is the nuts and bolts kinds of things. We produce information that helps other people in their lives, or we produce services that help other people in the world. That is our spiritual energy that is changing its form. It's being used for something else, and we will always need a way, I think, to compensate and balance what that means. When we talk to economists, and this is where it gets really interesting, there are 6 parameters that actually define money today. So I'm going to identify those, and then we're going to look at what that might mean. Now, I've spent a lot of my adult life exploring indigenous traditions all over the world, and there are many very successful traditions that have very successful economies that don't have any currency. They have money that you'll never see it because it is implied in the value of the things that they are exchanging. When I looked at the question that came to us, what would it take for us to live in a world without money? I think we may be looking at as a world without currency, where we still have value for the things that we do and the things that we need in the exchange of our spiritual energy, but it's not going to be in the form of a unit that can be manipulated in the new world. I think we could very successfully live in a world. We have a very successful economy. Economies are about people, and it's about people getting the things that they need, the vital resources of food, energy, water, medicine, communication, security. And I think you can have all of that without currency. So I'll stop there, and then maybe we'll have some conversation, and I'll chime back in. Does that make any sense if I say it that way, John?
Sure, of course.
Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know. We'll have this
I
conversation a
wouldn't
lot.
tell you that it didn't make sense. Of course, yes.
Okay.
Kingsley, what do you think?
Well, thank you, John and Greg. And this is a highly complex question, John, as you kind of alluded to. It's not just take out the money. What we're looking at is a complete social reconstruction of reality to make this happen. I'm looking at this socially because money is a form of power, as we know, but it's a specific form of power. It's a form of control. So the money is embedded in a global control system. And that system is a hierarchical system. And this exchange of values, I mean, we on the ground, the masses have a value exchange system of goods and needs and wants. At the top of the hierarchy, it's a value system of control and status and what role you have. So to do that in the money, you have to dismantle this whole hierarchical structure of status and roles. So we have to completely have a different consciousness globally about how we see ourselves, how we see life, how we see existence in a bigger picture, and how each person perceives their participation in life and existence. So it cannot be based materially, because if you base your values materially, it's going to be very difficult to live in a world with purpose and meaning, with have absolutely no financial transactions. Any kind of planetary civilization in the future that doesn't have money has to have a coherent planetary civilization. And that's a huge stumbling block for us at the moment, because at the moment, the only kind of agenda for a planetary civilization is one that we're not going to accept. It's the New World Order, you see. So how do we move to a planetary civilization that is egalitarian? And the key word you mentioned, John, is transparency, because you have to have a transparent planetary civilization to have a global acceptance. So we need a global infrastructure of production and distribution that can operate out beyond finance, beyond money. So it has to be universally or planetary, globally agreed. So the question is, once we provided our needs, can the global civilization provide our wants? You know, because there are kind of living desires and beyond the needs. So my question would be, for us to be able to move into that globally, we need to have a shared collective civilizational, i.e. species-wide agreed aim. Now, anyone who's aware of intentional communities, we know that if the community has a shared intention, as long as that's coherent and agreed upon, the community sustains itself. Once factors lose the shared aim, the community starts to go in disarray and breakdown. So a whole consciousness about how we see ourselves in the scheme of things have to change.
Thank you. Very interesting. The transparency may in fact be the telepathy, the advent of telepathy, which then starts to put the wedge into the existing system that allows it to change. Penny, what do you think?
OMG.
OMG.
Yeah. So, so I'm gonna, Greg and Kingsley, you both said some really good things, and yourself as well, John. Just some very interesting little tidbits kind of sandwiched in there. So I'm going to start by saying, in other civilizations that don't have money, they have transfer. So first of all, let's back up a step. We are a physical, material dimension of existence. So therefore, naturally, our value is going to be on physical, material things. When you start moving away from that, now you're talking about what Kingsley was referring to, which is you have to have a whole change of consciousness. When you shift that consciousness, you're going toward, okay, we don't want to have money, or we're going to move beyond money and the problems money and currency cause. What are you really doing? You're moving to a fourth dimensional system. What is the major value of those fourth and fifth and above dimensional systems. That is intelligence. And intelligence is inherent in the entire system, in the lights, in the source material that we come from. So now everyone, not so much in fourth dimensional systems, but in fifth for sure. Everyone is focused on what do we need, versus what do we want? What do we need first? And that gets taken care of. And that is something that different people will be good at manifesting one thing, and others are better at manifesting something different. And so the collective is very, very careful about the development of each individual so that everybody gets developed in such a way that everybody has what they need. So the full human development of intelligence is the value. And that's what replaces the money. So you have education for intelligence, resource management in the form of the humans, and then the full scale set of skills, mental and emotional skills. Your question was, what would it take for humanity to live without money? If we move into a system that says, okay, maybe we can't move away from it entirely, but what would a hybrid system look like? We somehow understand that groups can evolve into the next stage of development, move up just a little bit on that frequency ladder, and hardly be seen or noticed by those who are still at what I'll call some of the lower frequency levels, and let them learn. Let them learn what they need to do to make their life better. Because if you take away that learning, they're never going to get there. They have to do it themselves.
Very good. Most fascinating. What do you think, Greg?
Well, first of all, thank you, Penny and Kingsley, both of you. I learned a lot, as I always do, from both of you. I love the way you think. John, I'm looking. I made an assumption when I read your question. What would it take for humanity to live without money, as humanity is today, in this third dimensional world? If we, this is where this whole conversation of disclosure comes in. Nobody in our community is going to bat an eye when we see a craft in a hangar in Area 51. Nobody's going to bat an eye when we see a biological being standing next to that craft. But the technology to navigate those craft is the disruptive technology that makes it possible. Now everyone has everything they need. We live in a world where everyone has energy. It's a given. Everyone has food, water, medicine. We have all those things, but human nature will still imagine. Human nature will still innovate. Human nature will still create. So this is the shift I think that Kingsley is referring to. Do we change as a species and say, I choose to innovate and create and share because I want to contribute to a better world? Or do we hang on to the mindset that says, this is my idea, what's in it for me? FEMA is stockpiling. If you follow their expenditures, they are stockpiling just the way they did before COVID, before the lockdowns. They're preparing for something. And the rate that they're stockpiling suggests it's probably going to be sooner than later, sometime spring, summer. Maybe that's your bird flu right there. I don't know, Kingsley. So that next 2 weeks, that's what I'm looking at.
Well, if all of that happens, it's going to be very interesting. And so we'll have good things to talk about in a couple of weeks when we come back. So thank you again. Thank you, all three of you, for a delightful, provocative conversation. And thank all of our listeners for being with us. And we'll come back and see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much, John, Kingsley, and Penny. Thank everybody for tuning in.
Bye-bye. Yeah, thanks.